UN Palestinian refugee agency UNRWA said 6 staffers were killed after 2 airstrikes hit a school in central Gaza, marking what it said was the highest death toll among its staff in a single incident. The 6 staffers were among 18 killed in the airstrikes on a school in central Gaza. Earlier on Wednesday, the Israeli army said that it conducted a strike on a command and control center in Nuseirat in central Gaza, which it said was operated by Palestinian militant faction Hamas. Condemning the attack, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said that a lack of accountability for the killing of United Nations staff and humanitarian aid workers in the Gaza Strip was totally unacceptable. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu toured the Jordan Valley in the Israeli-occupied West Bank. He has promised to secure the eastern border with Jordan by building a robust barrier. Netanyahu's visit comes 2 days after 3 Israelis were shot dead by a Jordanian gunman at an Israeli-controlled border crossing between West Bank and Jordan. Touring the border region, the Prime Minister said efforts to bolster security at the border would be done in collaboration with Jordan. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in Poland to meet with Prime Minister Donald Tusk and President Duda. He will discuss support for Ukraine as upcoming US elections and Russian attacks raise new jitters. Washington's top diplomat travels to NATO ally Poland following a visit to Kiev on Wednesday, where he heard Ukrainian officials' appeals to be allowed to fire Western-supplied missiles deep inside Russian territory. The Australian government has revoked medals from commanders whose units were implicated in alleged war crimes and unlawful conduct in Afghanistan between 2005 and 2016. Australian Defence Minister Richard Marles said the decision was needed to address the wrongs of the past. The decision comes following the Brereton report, which exposed unlawful killings by elite special forces. An official inquiry has found that during an 11-year period, Australia's elite special forces unlawfully killed 39 civilians and prisoners in Afghanistan. Australia's government says it will fine internet platforms up to 5% of their global revenue for failing to prevent the spread of misinformation online, joining a worldwide push to rein in borderless tech giants but angering free speech advocates. The Australian government says it will make tech platforms set codes of governing how they stop dangerous falsehoods from spreading, to be approved by a regulator. The regulator would set its own standard. If a platform failed to do so, then fine companies for non-compliance. South Korea's military says North Korea fired multiple short-range ballistic missiles off its east coast on Thursday, the first such launch in more than 2 months. Japan's Coast Guard also said a projectile believed to be a ballistic missile fired from North Korea had already fallen. According to sources, there had been no reports of damage from the suspected missile. North Korea last fired a missile on July 1st when it claimed to have successfully tested a new tactical ballistic missile capable of carrying a 4.5-ton super large warhead. Chinese and Serbian government envoys have agreed to further implement the consensus reached by the heads of state of China and Serbia on cooperation between the two countries. and international issues of common concern. At the meeting with Serbian Deputy Prime Minister Aleksandar Vulin, Wang Yi, Director of the Office of the Central Commission for Foreign Affairs, recalled that Chinese President Xi Jinping's recent state visit to Serbia yielded positive outcomes, and the two heads of state have established solid mutual trust, reached broad consensus, and worked toward building a community with a shared future between China and Serbia. Pope Francis started the second day of his Singapore trip with a visit to the nation's parliament. The Pope was greeted by Singapore's president before entering the building, where rows of ceremonial guards, members of parliament and leaders of the local Catholic Church, including Cardinal William Goh, welcomed him. He was presented with a specially grown orchid, the national flower of Singapore, which was named after him. The Pontiff is on the final leg of an ambitious 12-day journey across Southeast Asia and Oceania, the longest trip of his papacy. Perus' former authoritarian president Alberto Fujimori died at the age of 86 from tongue cancer on Wednesday. While many considered him a corrupt dictator, others credited him with ending an economic crisis. While he was known for steering economic growth during the 1990s, he was later jailed for human rights abuses stemming from a bloody war against Maoist rebels during his term. Jordan's opposition party, the Islamic Action Front or IAF, has secured majority in the recently concluded parliamentary elections in what could be termed as a historic moment for the party in over 3 decades. The IAF has tripled its representatives in the parliament by securing 31 out of 138 seats. According to the Election Commission, the party has managed to secure 17 out of the allocated 41 seats in general constituencies, while winning 14 seats in local electoral constituencies. The victory meant that the party now has the largest number of representatives since 1989. A former CIA officer has been sentenced to 10 years in prison on the charge of spying for China. 71-year-old Alexander Yuqing-Ma was a contract linguist for the FBI who received cash, golf clubs and other expensive gifts in exchange for spying for China. Alexander Yuqing-Ma made a deal in May with federal prosecutors who agreed to recommend the 10-year term in exchange for his guilty plea. According to court records, a U.S. judge has approved the deal and handed down the agreed upon sentence. At least 197 people dead as Typhoon Yagi sweeps through northern Vietnam, bringing flash floods and landslides. About 128 people are still missing and more than 250,000 hectares of crops have been destroyed. Typhoon Yagi, Vietnam's most powerful storm in 30 years, has left at least 1.5 million people without power. Residents waded through deep floodwaters in Vietnam's Thai Nguyen province as evacuations continued. Some families said they had been separated for 4 days, unable to evacuate in time before the floods hit, while supplies were being delivered by boat to those still stranded. Hurricane Francine slammed southern Louisiana, pounding New Orleans with heavy rains and gusty winds, while threatening the wider Gulf Coast with a potentially deadly storm surge that led to evacuation orders for thousands of people. Hurricane Francine packed maximum sustained winds of 75 miles per hour after the eye of the storm traveled inland. The Hurricane Center briefly upgraded the storm from Category 1 to Category 2 on the 5-step Simpson scale just before it made landfall. Thousands of people took to the streets of Bolivian cities to protest the wildfires that have devastated more than 4 million hectares, destroying livelihoods and wildlife. Protesters in La Paz, Cochabamba and Santa Cruz demanded that the government of Bolivian President Luis Arce repeal a package of laws which activists say encourage land clearance through burning. The fires have been raging for weeks, exacerbated by drought, shrouding cities in smog and putting the South American country on track for potentially a record year of fires. Top executives from Google, Microsoft, Meta and Adobe will be testifying before the US Senate Intelligence Committee on September 18th regarding election security threats. With the November 5th election approaching, where Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump will compete, US officials are ramping up efforts to combat online misinformation. Past intelligence reports have accused Russia, Iran and China of election interference, though these countries have denied the claims. India is facing a surge in investment scams. The latest victim is an army doctor from the Indian city of Pune who lost nearly $143,000 to cyber criminals. According to the doctor's complaint, the scam started when he joined a WhatsApp group via a link. The group's admins promised high returns for stock market investments. Trusting the group, the doctor downloaded a trading app that they recommended, which turned out to be a scam. Over time, he made around 35 transactions, transferring $143,000 to various fraudulent accounts. Well, this right here is a robotic leg running and hopping thanks to its artificial muscles. These artificial muscles help improve robots' agility, allowing robots to navigate varied terrains with ease. The leg's agility comes from its ability to lift its weight, similar to human jumping. Developed by a team of scientists from ETH Zurich and the Max Planck Institute for Intelligent Systems, it can adapt to the environment without needing sensors. Shares of Donald Trump's social media company. Shares of Donald Trump's social media company tumbled on Wednesday following his debate against his presidential election opponent Kamala Harris, a company owned by Trump. Truth Social saw its greatest one-day slump since June 28th, a 10% decline. This comes as data from the betting market website predictions show Trump's chances of winning the election have dropped to 48%. The unprofitable media company's drop extends a slump that has erased about $6 billion in market value since May. Wednesday's decline puts the stock on track to fall for an 8th straight week and leaves it nearly 75% below its March high. First half earnings in Asia showed how the ripple effects of the Red Sea crisis will continue to be costly for companies that make goods for export, while those that transport their wares benefit from higher freight rates. As of mid-July, container ship traffic in the tight tunnel has decreased by around 70%. This comes as ships avoid the risk of assault in the Red Sea. As a result, shipping costs and times rose. Finance chiefs in Beijing are testing new ways to boost the economy by encouraging demand. These efforts are breaking the long-established practice as threats to the country's growth target mount. However, in the provinces where authorities are strictly enforcing budget cuts, this acceptance of a more expansionary strategy in the capital is having the opposite impact to stimulate demand. Beijing used a significant portion of the money from this year's special sovereign bond auctions to subsidize the purchase of new equipment by individuals and businesses. Economists in Beijing have been eager to compare the country's current battle against a decline in property values to Japan. Evidence of a balance sheet recession similar to that in Japan seems to have been confirmed by recent data. Bank lending to firms and people in China shrank for the first time in almost 20 years, following a string of poor retail sales. There are other unsettling parallels between Asia's two biggest economies. In China, a broad index of prices has logged 5 consecutive quarters of declines, the longest stretch of deflation since the 1990s. Stocks traded on the mainland and Hong Kong exchanges have lost a combined $5 trillion in market value in the last 3 years. In the years when China minted a billionaire every 2 days, banking rainmaker BofA almost reached that milestone himself. He became one of the most sought-after financiers in the country because of his expertise advising internet titans like Alibaba Group Holding. He amassed a wealth of over $800 million through his ownership in China Renaissance Holdings. Authorities imprisoned Bao last year as part of a larger crackdown, and his career collapsed as a result.